Whiskey Bravo, Salem altimeter 3009er, stay altitude, type aircraft, and attention.
3009, position check, 5,500, destination Troutdale, type is Foxtrot, Delta, Charlie, Tango, 814 Whiskey Bravo.
Number 4 Whiskey Bravo, roger, maintain VFR.
VFR, 4
On a recent flight, I couldn't make my destination, but wanted to do some more flying, so I diverted and went to Troutdale. The reason is that I had zero wind at home, but Troutdale was really gusty. I like practicing in strong winds occasionally. I then used this flight as an excuse to talk to CFI Nathan Ballard to review high wind techniques. You'll hear our conversation later, but first let me show you the approach and first landing.
Charlie Tower formation at Zulu, 19530 Zulu, wind 08020, gust 31, visibility 10. Guys, clear for 12000, temperature 902.1, altimeter 3011. Runway 7, visual approaching you.
November 4 Whiskey Bravo, correction, November 4 Whiskey Bravo, runway 7, wind is 07025, gust 35, clear to land, Cessna traffic, short final.
Tower Cessna 535 Quebec, holding short runway 7, ready for southbound departure.
November 535 Quebec, to the tower, hold short runway 7 for departure.
Hold short runway 7, 535 Quebec.
November 4 Whiskey Bravo, continuing the left close traffic.
Left close traffic, 4 Whiskey Bravo.
November 4 Whiskey Bravo, runway 7, wind 07025, gust 38, clear touch and go.
Clear touch and go, 4 Whiskey Bravo. Clear touch and go 7, 4 Whiskey Bravo.
Leaving altitude.
November 5 Alpha Quebec, frequency change approved.
Frequency change for 5 Alpha Quebec.
November 4 Whiskey Bravo, runway 7, wind 07024, gust 38, clear touch and go.
Clear touch and go, 7, Whiskey Bravo.
Leaving altitude.
On this landing, I decided to use full flaps. It's generally not recommended in crosswinds or gusts, but it was a good experiment. Full flaps requires getting the airspeed below 60, which is below my normal approach speed. So you can see I pitch up enough to slow it down. Then I put in full flaps right here, and that extra drag quickly puts my airspeed in the 50 range rather than the 60 range. With the wind and full flaps, it feels like I can just point the plane right at the ground, which is good because the plane is high, or it would be high if it wasn't for the 30 plus knot winds. Okay, let's watch that again and bring in CFI Nathan Ballard.
The fifth one was the one where the AOA went off and kind of went a little left of center line because of a gust.
So this is with full flaps, and all of the guidance of this plane says don't bother using full flaps. You basically always land it at half flaps. And I knew I was high on that one, and I wanted to try it, right? And oh great, full flaps with wind. That's a combination. But one of the things that makes me nervous, or that happens when I land with full flaps in this, is that getting slow enough and not stalling it feels like that buffer is really short.
You can definitely make it fall when people just keep adding back pressure, and that's probably one thing as an instructor makes me the most nervous is when they flare or round out too high, and I'm just sitting there watching that airspeed number go down. I don't want people to push forward, right? We want to let gravity do its job usually, but sometimes you gotta, release a little bit of back pressure just to get it down to, 2 or 3 feet over the runway, then hold it off. That is probably one of the most nerve-wracking things, is when I'm at 10, 20 feet and like, oh no, here we go.
Leaving altitude.
November 4 Whiskey Bravo, runway 7, wind 07023, gust 24, correction 34, clear touch and go.
Approaching altitude.
Okay, I'm going to attempt a short approach here, but I'm not like super committed to it. If it goes weird, I can just go around.
And here's a conversation we had about the power off 180 landing. It's hard to estimate the effects of high winds on the power off 180 landing, so that's why I briefed it in such a non-committal way. Anyhow, our conversation is about power off 180s and mostly about pattern sizes.
One of the things I like to, at least in the traffic pattern, as a newer pilot, as we develop our skills, our patterns are wider. But over time, with experience, I like for them to get narrow, closer and closer to the runway. If I lost an engine and I'm in the pattern and I couldn't make it to the runway, I would never, forgive myself. So
Yeah.
As long as you can always make the runway, and like your power off 180, when I was watching, I was like, oh man, I don't have any experience in that airplane, but I wasn't sure how it's going to work out. But I mean, you just
me neither.
totally. Well, I mean, you really put it
with the wind.
You put it, yeah, with that wind. You put it on there. It was fantastic. Pattern in general, just to make sure you can always get to a runway if something happens.
I was taught that every landing is a power off 180 because I don't really hear instructors talk about that too much, but it is, as you said, it's could I make the runway without power? And so in a way, isn't that everything is a power off 180 landing, right? Like,
I mean, pretty much. I mean, especially with my commercials students, I make sure that if you're going to be a commercial pilot, you need to fly tight pattern and not put yourself in that situation. I mean, as newer private or sport pilots, the big wide pattern feels good. They got time to get things set up, but that's one of the skills you just refine over time, I think. Really, and I've said this before, like I'm in the right seat. I can tell how the landing's going to go half mile or mile out usually because how things are set up. And like what you were doing in your pattern work it looked very methodical and planned and like repeatable. So could tell those landings were going to be good. The gust factor was tough.
Yeah. I've never really talked to other pilots about this, or it's like, you've got this much wind, you're at pattern by the time you get to the far end of the runway. What do? Do you turn your crosswind when you hit 300 feet below pattern? Or, I guess for me, it's like, I shouldn't be turning until I'm at the end of the runway.
I agree with that. I know you were zipping up so quickly, but at least with our Class Delta airport, they're very specific. They're like, do not turn out until you get to the end of the runway. I don't know if that's a hard and fast kind of rule, but it does seem like it makes sense. Just wait a little bit.
It doesn't matter. It's like, okay, well, so you're at pattern height. That doesn't matter. You're still not to the end of the runway. It also helps for things not to be going quite so quickly on the downwind. If you're not turning early for a downwind and then going 120 knots on your downwind, you can't get things back together before that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another thing that I thought was really good, and this is something that a lot of people don't do well, is they'll just fly a crab all the way down the runway and they'll kick it at the end, right? They'll kick some rudder at the end. And you got to be pretty skilled to do that, and that typically doesn't, it certainly can work out fine. But the better way, right, is keep the airplane straight, right? Use your rudder, keep it on the road or the runway. Use your aileron. It just feels so unnatural for some people. So I was very happy to see what, you're correcting for your crosswind that appropriately.
I learned that from my DPE, who said, "I'm not telling you to change what you do, but why don't you try this?" And I started doing it after that. And what I like about that is there's less to think about. I'm putting it in the correct direction. And so I only have to think about one input to give at that point. I don't have to try to solve this 3D puzzle.
Flight design 4, Whiskey Bravo, maintain at or above 1,700. Join final at or above 1,700. Runway 31 left, clear to land, wind 0303. Traffic several sections in the pattern to the north parallel.
I'll maintain at or above 1,700. 31 left, clear to land, Whiskey Bravo. Tower 814 Whiskey Bravo, you see me above 1,700 still. Be ready for departure.
Cessna 224 Sierra Papa, Hillsborough Tower, roger, landing traffic.
Whiskey Bravo, my still restricted 1,700.
Flight design 4, Whiskey Bravo, as soon as you're established on final altitude restriction removed. Runway 31 left, clear to land.
All right, restriction removed, Whiskey Bravo.
What's funny about that to me is here I slipped so many landings in this thing. I mean, this was such a great example because I don't know if you saw why I was staying high on this coming back to my home airport.
The last
she told me to stay. She told me to stay, and then it was just implied that I didn't have to stay that high. So here I'll slip like this. I'll slip all the way down and not even straighten it out until I'm right there, right? Look at this. I am entirely comfortable doing that, where I'm slipping to land and then kicking out at the very last second. But I don't like doing that in crosswinds.
Yeah.
If I am correcting for a crosswind, I want to be pointing in the correct direction.
That's right. That last landing, that slip I thought that was fantastic. And yes, the kick out, kick it straight at the end. It was perfect. It looked great. I don't know if you have your tail wheel. The main thing in tail wheel is you need to keep the airplane straight. That's the number one rule in tail. Keep it straight.
So that's the end of my conversation with Nathan. I really appreciate that he took the time to talk with me and review the flight.